Okay, I hope there are people out there.
Can I ask you to hold for 2 seconds? It's still
just loading.
It's loading.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, we've just redirected to YouTube. I'll now.
That's all right. Just click this. Go on this screen. That's all right. That's good. That's what's meant to do. And then now just shut that.
Okay.
Yep, shut it. Otherwise you can shut that too. Don't worry about that. Beautiful. All right, Mark. Good to go.
All right. I believe everything's set up and we're online and we're ready to go. So my name's Mark Adcock. I'm the presiding member of the panel. We have all members present at the moment. So I'd like to declare the meeting open at 5:35, I think it is. Welcome everybody. I've just got a couple of remarks to make at this stage. We're in a difficult situation with the coronavirus legislation having just been passed as well, but it does give us the ability to meet online in this forum. It's going to be awkward and difficult, and I stress that we are doing the best we can under the circumstances. I've been asked to advise you that as the meeting is being streamed live on the City of, it will also be recorded and published on the internet. That means that any of the audio and visual recording of the meeting will be disclosed or able to be disclosed publicly or published by the council, including outside of Australia. So I just wish you all to be aware of those unusual circumstances. Also, given that we're streaming and meeting electronically, I'd like people to be especially patient, but also to wait your turn. If you are a speaker, wait your turn to speak. Someone will advise you when to speak. And if we're in conversation, to make sure you don't talk over the top of anyone, because that will muffle and block out audio. If you are able to turn off your microphone, do so when you're not talking. And I would ask you to talk slowly and clearly, more slowly than perhaps you would in a face-to-face situation, so that we can follow you as best we can. So I'd just like to introduce the members of the panel that are online at the moment. Welcome to Councillor Aman Abrahimzadeh, who is the newly appointed council representative on the panel, and the other specialist members, Mr. Mark Duncan, Ms. Colleen Dunn, and Professor Mads Gardbo. I trust you can see us all. I can't, but I know that you're all in the room. Moving on to items of business. The first item on today's agenda is to consider a temporary addendum to our meeting procedures for the purposes of holding them by electronic means. This was put in place before the coronavirus legislation passed. Nevertheless, I think it's wise that we also include the provision to do live streaming and to do electronic meetings when unusual circumstances dictate. So members, you've had a chance to look at the suggested wording of the new meeting procedures. Did anybody want to make any comment or discussion, or would somebody like to move and second the motion? Your hand if you wish to speak, or unmute yourself.
I'm happy to move as it is, Chair.
Thank you, Man. Is there a seconder to that?
Happy to second those. Yep.
I heard Mark Duncan first, so Mark will be the seconder. So all those in favour, if you could just do a show of hands. Right, all in favour, so that's unanimous, no one against. So that is carried. Item 2 on the agenda is the confirmation of the minutes of the last meeting held on the 24th of February 2020. Does anybody wish to make any comment in relation to the minutes or move that they be adopted?
I'm happy to move that they be adopted, Mark.
Thank you. That's moved by Mark Duncan. Do we have a seconder?
Happy to second.
Thank you, Mads. All those in favour? Just full show of hands. Thank you very much. They are adopted as printed. We have no non-complying development applications, so that brings us to the first item on tonight's agenda of business, which is the Hutt Street Centre at 254 to 268 Hutt Street. I've been advised that there are now 2 members of the panel that have a conflict of interest. I'd like them to declare and identify what that conflict is, and then they will be moved to the waiting room where they will await out that item. They won't have any access to the meeting for that particular item. Mark, would you like to go first, please?
Yes, certainly, Mark. I have an actual conflict. I have no involvement in this application, but the firm in which I'm employed by has submitted a representation. So I think out of abundance of caution and to avoid a perceived conflict, I'll absent myself from this item.
Thank you, Mark. That will be noted in the minutes, and we'll see you at the end of the item. Aman, I believe you also.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have an indirect conflict of interest. There is a certificate of title amongst the documents and the submissions, and there's a caveat that is shown by the South Australian Housing Trust. The South Australian Housing Trust is my employer, and so there is that conflict of interest that I would like noted and minuted.
Thank you, Aman. That will be noted in the minutes, and we'll see you after the meeting, after the item. Now, we have a number of representatives who wish to be heard, and I think all of them are being represented. And the first on my list is Mr. Chris Vanassis on behalf of John Theodorakis of 252 Hutt Street. Chris, you would be aware, as everybody would, of our procedures. We allow 5 minutes for representations, and at the conclusion of your representation, I'll ask members of the panel if they have any questions. Over to you. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. You can hear me well?
Perfectly.
Okay. Thank you, Presiding Member. I'll get straight into it. Based on our extensive investigations, the full list of development approvals that apply to land, in our view, have not been thoroughly interrogated, and therefore consideration of this application is futile. The operation purported is not an existing and authorised community care and services facility. And secondly, the operation has intensified so significantly through the introduction of unauthorised uses since 1994. The Daughters of Charity actually commenced use of the subject site as a chapel and ministering the needs of elderly in 1953-1954. The centre was not approved as institutional care until July 1994. And it's this particular development application that is so critical for the panel to understand in the context of the uncontrolled and excessive scale of the operation as it exists today. The 94 proposal related to the demolition of one villa for the purposes of constructing a single-storey building for institutional care. As a result of public notification, the officer's report to the then Council's Development Assessment Committee on the 27th of June stated, and I quote, "The primary concern from 169 opposing signatories in 2 petitions stems from the behaviour of the users of the centre and the perceived resulting effect on business. In other words, the issues that we are bringing to your attention today still remain some 25 years later." The report also stated that the proposal constituted, and I quote, "a minor intensification of the existing use." It was further stated that, and I quote, "these proposals will upgrade substantially our existing services for those currently attending and is not envisaged that this development will cater for increased numbers." In summary, this application confirms the institutional care land use, the minor intensification of the activity with no increased numbers envisaged. Further, the issues relating to the smaller scale centre operation at that time still exist some 25 years later. Let's fast forward 12 years later. According to the 2016 Australian of the Year honour roll for Mr. Ian Cox, the former centre CEO, and I quote, "Ian started at Hutt Street Centre in 1992 as a social work student. From a crew of 6 on the front line, Ian has grown the organisation into a team of more than 220 staff and active volunteers. And then, at the time of the Open State Festival, which was held between September and October 2017, at which Mr. Cox was a speaker, it was stated, and I quote, "The centre has a wide array of services, including approximately 14 visiting services, RDNS, GPs, psychologists, etc." Further, according to the October 2019 expression of interest document for the position occupied by the current CEO, there were 18 visiting professional services, including GPs, registered nurses, eye clinics, legal advice, and financial counselling. The financial statements contained with the centre's annual reporting, all publicly available, clearly support substantial growth and intensity since the land use was set in 1995. For example, employee and executive expenses in 93 totaled around a few $100,000 compared to around 5.5 million in 2019. Together with the aforementioned facts, this makes an absolute mockery of the minor intensification and no envisaged additional numbers statements confirmed in the 94 development application. This is the historical factual context of this centre. There is nothing after this 94 application that we can find which confirms that approval was obtained for such increased intensity, scale, and additional uses which currently occurs. All you need to do is compare the floor plan of the 94 application with that which is identified as demolition plan in the subject application. From November 95, the asserted use goes back to daycare centre, again, without a change in land use application. And now the centre purports to be an existing community care and services facility, again, without a change in land use application. To conclude, I've been a practitioner in the planning development industry for almost 20 years. It beggars belief that this fundamental land use issue and the centre's operation has not been interrogated, and particularly when the council itself provides a considerable number of grants to the centre. The factual evidence exists. It exists within the centre's own public statements and reporting. Either the centre has not been honest about the use and intensity of its operation since 94, or council's records are inaccurate for our position to be generally refuted. This alone should be very concerning to the panel, and in the unlikely event that it is insufficient, the deeply concerning security camera footage that you've been furnished with demonstrates that the centre fails to have an appropriate management plan to deal with its clients. It has inadequate resources and the requisite specialist expertise to deal with the majority of its clients who suffer from mental illness, has insufficient space and amenity on the site for its clients, and finally has a track record of at least 25 years of being inept or unable to address detrimental off-site impacts associated with its clients. I urge the panel to not repeat council's mistakes of the past. Should you have even the slightest doubt over this land use matter, the extent of unauthorised activity, the intensity of the operation, or the centre's clear inept ability to manage its clients, it would simply be irresponsible in our view to support this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, you're well and truly over your 5 minutes, so thank you for that. Have you finished? You
Yes.
said what you wanted to say. Thank you. Members of the panel, do you have any questions? Raise your hand if you do. I can't see you, Mads. Okay, I take it there are no questions. Thank you, Chris, for your contribution.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Mr. Phil Brunning. Phil is representing 2, 3, 4, 5 different parties. Phil, I can't see that you're online. Can you confirm that you're online?
I'm here. You can't see me?
You're on the phone, are you?
No.
Now I can see you.
You can see me? Yep. Shall I proceed?
Phil representing 5. Yes, just let me clarify. You're representing 5 parties. Do you want me to identify those individually, or are you happy to just talk to them as a whole?
I'm happy to talk to them. I think they're on the screen for everyone to read, including Colorectal SA, the Arab Steed Hotel, and various other restaurants in that on that side of Hearts Road.
All right. Phil, we'll give you 5 minutes per representor, but we understand you might be able to make that a little bit shorter.
I'll bring that in. Yeah, certainly.
Thank you.
And thanks very much for the opportunity to address the panel. As you would have read in my written submissions, more particularly in relation to Colorectal SA and also the Arab Steed Hotel, we raise particular concerns with this proposal, most notably the impacts arising from the activity conducted on site. Prior to, I guess, dealing with these impacts, I would like to reaffirm or amplify the points made by Mr. Vanassis in his submission as to the changing nature and the intensity of activities that have been conducted on this land over past years, and more particularly since 1994. I'm also of the view that this amounts to a change in the use of land and therefore development such that requires consideration as part of this application. Which is, in my view, not simply for physical works, as suggested. While I accept that the use was established prior to contemporary town planning laws coming into effect, such in itself does not quarantine or immunise the activity from scrutiny thereafter. And I feel it only proper for the planning authority to be given the opportunity to do so, having regard to current day development plan policy. And I've referred to the relevant policies in my submissions. I'm of the view that the use has changed substantially since it was conceived in 1954, and more particularly from that which was approved in 1994, which in itself was a leap too far, in my opinion. And despite significant concern from the local community at the time, council rationalised, I say naively, the introduction of additional activities on the site as a minor intensification. As Mr. Vanassis has cautioned the panel, I do likewise. Don't make the same mistake, and I'd encourage you to scratch a bit deeper, be a bit more prudent and considered with the benefit of a clear understanding of past activities. I assert that an independent review ought to be conducted of the current land use activity in comparison with that approved in 1994, and to the extent that the two differ, advice should be provided to the panel. With respect, this issue has not been adequately dealt with in the assessment report before you this evening. A review of the floor plan from 1994 and that now proposed will support this claim. Significantly more offices and consulting room spaces have been provided over past years. That's a very simple check that ought to have been performed. Moreover, a simple look at the centre's operating budget over the last 10 years is an indicator of change and intensification. One measure of employee expenses has increased fivefold from just over $1 million in 2010 to over $5 million in 2019. Whereas expenditure on food, one of their core services, provision of meals, has remained relatively constant at around $70,000 per year. This correlates with the statements made to the Select Committee of the Legislative Council on Poverty in SA back in March of last year, that there is an increasing proportion of clients suffering mental illness, between 70 and as high as 90% on occasions, and that services have been adapted to address this increase, more so than that which was the case in past years. And this, to my mind, is another indicator of change. To proceed without a thorough response to this question will not be proper town planning, in my view, and would only perpetuate the land use conflict for a further generation. This is an opportunity to ensure that if the use is to continue, it must continue within the capacity of its facilities and the locality. The reality of the situation cannot be ignored on the basis of simply saying that the centre enjoys existing use rights. As Mr Levinson will assert in a moment, to the extent that existing use rights may prevail, they are not absolute or unfettered. This review is even more critical given the rise in violence and antisocial behaviour fuelled by an unfortunate cocktail of alcohol, mental illness, and most profoundly, a rise in the use of methamphetamine. This final element was not present in the operating environment back in 1994, whereas now it is sadly an increasing contributor to bad behaviour. As outlined in my written submissions, the operations of the Hutt Street Centre give rise to a range of unacceptable impacts on this locality, including loitering and obstructing the public footpath, trespass and property damage, defecation and urination on private land, drug dealing and use, with evidence of syringes and other drug paraphernalia left on private property, again captured on CCTV, antisocial behaviour and violence, fighting and even a stabbing, intimidation, public nuisance and disruption, the harassment and assault of vulnerable and frail patients of the medical centre that are attending for cancer treatment, making their way from the parking area at 321 South Terrace to the front door. Banging on the windows and the breaking of windows of restaurants during lunch and dinner service, begging for money and cigarettes from outdoor diners. And I guess finally, centre staff monopolising on-street car parking on this section of Hutt Street. These activities have had a profound effect on the amenity and function of this precinct for the enjoyment of residents, businesses and their customers, and is supported by police report data. One thing I do note is the reporting does not include those persons detained under the Mental Health Act. So that there are additional instances that ought to be taken into account. Numerous anecdotal accounts from my clients, my personal experience as a frequent user of Hutt Street, and the video which I trust you've had the opportunity to view or will view following my submission. This problem was acknowledged within the Hutt Street Growth Plan prepared by Hudson House back in December of last year. And I draw your attention to page 68, and I won't necessarily read it for you verbatim, other than to say that the major problem is antisocial behaviour. And the very harsh reality is that the services being delivered in this location are having a detrimental impact on the residential and business communities. These impacts are completely unacceptable, cannot be dismissed by the centre as not being their responsibility. The centre may not say that their clients are not their responsibility once on the public street, having been attracted to the locality in the first place by the services they provide, which to an extent enable and perpetuate this unsatisfactory situation, insofar as a holistic solution is not provided to the challenges that these unfortunate people face. Regrettably, the Hutt Street Centre does not provide the holistic solution to homelessness and only addresses part of the equation. The critical missing element is housing. As a senior government official who would like to remain unnamed at this point has put it recently, apparently all of the rough sleepers and those that need a home have got accommodation during the COVID-19 crisis. The government has showed that they can fix this. Currently lodged in service departments, and they love it. This has provided the clients of the centre more dignity, and the services, including meals, have been delivered to their accommodation the way it should be. They want to stay after COVID-19, but the government will no doubt throw them out onto the street again. So we can continue to do what does not work. Why is this so? This is an opportunity to take a breath and review the current situation prior to them committing more funds to this property, reviewing the nature of activities that are occurring on the site. It may be that this location and the facilities provided no longer satisfy the needs of the homeless and may be better provided elsewhere. That's about as much as I'd like to say. I'm not sure whether the video is to be played now or has been played. Maybe that could be clarified for me.
Phil, the video has not been played tonight, but it has been distributed to the panel members and to the applicant.
Very good. Okay. Well, I'll leave it there and happy to respond to any questions that members of the panel may have of me.
All right. Thank you, Phil. Just sit tight. Do any members of the panel have any questions of Mr. Brunning? Unmute yourself and speak up, please.
Phil, thank you. Tell me what you believe is the path forward here. Do you think that we should refuse this application? And then where does that leave the Hutt Street Centre? What's your, I mean, they will presumably continue to operate. So what's your position or the position of your clients with respect to that?
Well, I think it's the point of expending another $2 million on these works when this might actually be an opportunity to consider first principles in a way that would better serve the needs of their clients. I acknowledge that they have and will continue and may continue to operate here to an extent. We believe that many of the activities that are being conducted have not been approved, and so we wouldn't accept that the use is entirely lawful. I think it's, council can send a clear message, the panel can send a clear message that this proposal ought not to proceed and enable, I guess, a use that's continuing to expand and intensify. So the two, both the built form and the use, are inextricably linked. I don't see how you can separate them artificially and seek to determine this application for works when they facilitate a use, an activity which is changing. And I think it's improper that scrutiny is not applied to that activity.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. Mads, did you want to ask any questions?
Yeah, I understand the problems that is discussed here, and obviously behavior is a major issue. Of course, we are not in a position to change the land use of this particular site. So whatever we decide today, do you see that that would affect the behavior? How would you imagine that happening?
As I responded earlier, I don't think you could to separate and focus solely on the physical works. I think the artificial, their proposed purpose is an activity which is changing and continuing to change and intensify. A refusal of this application would send a signal that there might be a more appropriate way of providing these services to their clients, and it may not be in this location. The expenditure of another $2 million on the property only further entrenches the use which we say has outgrown its site.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mads. Phil, I've got one question. I could have asked this of Chris too, I suppose. I'll ask it of you. If this application is refused, how will that address the issues that you've just been talking to us about? What will change, in your view? Planning issues.
It is a signal to the management of the centre that they cannot wash their hands of the activity that occurs beyond the site. So again, I say it's artificial to focus solely on the physical works when there has been little or no meaningful consideration of the use which these works will enable. So if not refusal, certainly I feel there's a need for a deferral to fully appraise yourself of what actually happens on site in comparison with past approvals. And to the extent that there's a gap, the applicant needs to be more forthcoming.
So you think it's the role of the panel to send a signal to people in these sort of circumstances? That's our fundamental role? Well,
I guess ordinarily, possibly not. However, we've got a situation here where such a profound impact is occurring on an ongoing basis, decade on decade. This is not a phenomenon. And at some point, the planning authority must, in my view, send a signal to the operators and say, you haven't been managing it appropriately. You haven't been managing your offsite impacts. It's not warranted that you continue to expand and intensify.
All right, thank you, Phil. I'll leave it at that. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, we now need to get online Mr. Levinson from Cotton Levinson, who is representing J1 Nominees Proprietary Limited. James, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can.
Excellent. Would you like me to start?
You may. Thank you.
Thank you. We act for J1 Nominees, the owner of the adjacent St Andrews Medical Centre. We've made detailed written submissions and I won't go over them. Our client's concerned about this proposal because what it does is entrenches a land use that is in fundamentally the wrong location. The impacts of this existing set of activities is widely reported and obvious, and Mr. Brunning has summarised them. We say that this is basic planning. The merits of this application are all based on the massive assertion that there's no change in use from the current activities on site. And the language is very important here. I'll return to it with some emphasis. What you are being asked to do is to approve a new set of uses under the cloak of an application just for building work. So it's not that, as the question was phrased to Mr. Brunning, that what difference will it make if we refuse this? It is simply unsafe to approve it. Now, I mentioned the difference between activities and approvals. That is fundamental to the assessment. It is fundamental to what has been put before you by the applicant, both by their planners and their lawyers. There is considerable disagreement about what the existing approvals say and whether the current activities are consistent with those existing approvals. This application simply doesn't address that issue. And that is so important, given that the whole merit of this proposal is founded on these assertions about the existing use rights. Master Plan, in their application, have invented the phrase existing care and services facility. That's not a phrase that's in the development regulations. That's not a phrase that's used in any of the historic approvals. It is completely new. The council staff have simply followed along with this undefined terminology in the description of the proposal, and that is what you're asked to approve. And this compounds the problem in two ways. By the vague use of the word existing, do we mean existing approved or existing actual on site? And the vague and undefined term, which is going to the heart of the essential use. This is repeated in the response to representations where Hilditch lawyers are similarly ambiguous in their language. They talk about the facility will have the same kind as those presently undertaken in terms of activity, enable existing activities to be undertaken in the building. Now, precision here is critical. The panel needs to distinguish between the lawful approvals that are in place and the existing activities that actually occur on site today, because we say that they are not all lawful. Now, this is particularly a case of importance here because you have various development consents issued over many years. You've got a proposal to reconfigure an existing floor plan substantially. There is a very large argument being put to you about whether the existing activities are consistent with the approvals. And lastly, the merits of this application are all set on that same foundation. That is, that nothing will change from the existing activity. And we say the existing activity is not the mark to measure this from. The agenda report doesn't, with great respect, properly analyse the difference between the existing activities and the existing approvals. And this really needs to be more thoroughly investigated before you can determine it. The risk is that you're simply brushing over 25 years of land use change in an instant. If I can deal briefly with intensification and change in use, neither the agenda report nor the response to representation summarises the law properly. The leading case in South Australia is the City of Adelaide versus EPA, and Justice DeBell said, and I'm quoting, "In some instances where land is being used for more than one purpose, an intensification of one of those uses may result in a change of the use of that land. Whether it does is a question of fact, depending upon the extent to which the use has been intensified." That is exactly the situation here. Therefore, the panel needs to be very confident that there is no change in the intensity of any one or more of the uses that necessarily flows from the substantial difference in the floor plans and the substantial difference in the old approvals, not the current activities, but the existing approvals. It needs to properly, and I say this again with great respect, understand when assessing this application, what the
that would be your 5 minutes, James. That's throwing you. If you could just take a minute or so to wind up, I'll be happy for you to do that.
No, I'm nearly there. The panel needs to properly understand those existing approvals when assessing this application. Otherwise, it's authorising by stealth a change in use. There are substantial changes in terms of scale, range of activities, staff numbers, etc. The case of Karatinos underscores the importance of doing this. So we simply say this is very basic planning. It's very basic due diligence, and the proposal simply cannot be approved in the current state of understanding. Those are my submissions. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Members of the panel, do you have any questions? Colleen, perhaps? No, shake of the head. Mads, do you have any questions of James?
Maybe a comment. I'm sure you would agree that what the centre provides is an important service. What you're saying is that perhaps it's in the wrong location. Isn't it fair to believe that no location would be the right location? And what is the particular difficulty with Hutt Street as far as you're concerned? I know that could be a long answer, but is there any particular issue that you are thinking of?
Well, look, obviously it's not the panel's burden to find the proper location for this. What we are saying simply is that when you look at the development plan provisions, this land use is at odds with the development plan provisions. And I accept that there are two zones, but even looking at both of them, it's in the wrong location. That ultimately has to be the test. Now, the impacts of that are well set out, as Mr. Brunning has summarised. So I'm not suggesting that you're obliged in any way to find a better location, but the reason why you shouldn't simply say to yourselves, in effect, well, they're already there, they're already doing what they're doing, let's just let this continue, is twofold. One is because we say the extent of those operations is not lawful, but secondly, it's not in the right location, and certainly therefore not in the right location for that to be compounded or entrenched or extended. So it's a mix of those matters, which is important. I accept that these are difficult problems. I accept that these are matters that are multifaceted, and the planning system itself cannot be expected to deal with. But nobody's asking that of the panel nor the planning system. All that's being asked of the panel and the planning system is that the expectations of the planning system be properly adhered to, and our submission is simply that you cannot properly do that without understanding the divergence that we say exists between the activities and the approvals.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mads. James, why do you believe, or why are you telling us that the panel is responsible for adjudicating on the issue of existing use? Is that within our purvey to do that? And bear in mind, all we're hearing is your allegations, I presume you'd call them, that the uses don't exist. There's not been an inquiry through the council, as I understand it, and there's not been a court review, which would be the determining position, I would have thought.
Yes, look, I accept that these are not yet tested. With great respect and without trying to inflate the significance of the representors, which we all represent, these are allegations that are made at some length and in some detail. They're not simply, fly by the night allegations. We've set them out in detail in writing, and I accept that they remain to be tested, and that may well still happen. I'm certainly not suggesting that it's the panel's job to make any ruling or declaration on those existing use rights. That would be a matter for the council more broadly to investigate, and if it saw fit to take necessary action, or for any other person to take proceedings themselves in the court. It's not for the panel to make any declaration on that point. But as the assessing authority, the importance really is this. If you look at the history of this site and this set of land uses, it has for quite some time emerged and altered in its form and the list of activities that are being undertaken. You have a series of floor plans that nominate particular activities, and you now have a proposal that is put under the guise of simply building works, that has a substantial change to the layout. Now, all of that is put to you as on behalf of the applicant and in the council assessment report as being meritorious, because it is said there is no change, and in particular that there is no change from the existing activities. So what I'm saying is, well, on the face of it, you simply cannot accept that contention. It is something that at the very least needs to be investigated, because if you were to approve the existing floor plan, sorry, beg your pardon, the proposed floor plan, on the assumption that all of the existing activities could therefore be conducted pursuant to the approval that is now sought, it has the effect, and I'm sure you've seen this before, of an applicant turning around a week later and saying, oh, well, guess what? That consent swept in all of those other activities into this consent. It's now depicted on that floor plan. We're now allowed to do it. And we say that's simply wrong as a matter of principle. That goes against what the court said in Karatinos. It goes against the fundamentals of planning assessment. And so to that extent, you need to be confident that all of these contentions that are being put to you by the applicant in particular, because that's the entity that relies on it, are properly made out. And that's not a binding declaration, but it's a very important foundation upon which you need to make your decision. And we say it's simply unsafe for you to do so without that being very clearly and carefully laid out. It hasn't been done so in the response to reps. It hasn't been done so in the application documents. And again, with great respect, it really hasn't been set out in the assessment report. So I'm sorry for that long-winded answer. It's not to say that you must sit as a court, but necessarily you need to make your mind up about that point before you can assess the application.
All right, well, thanks, James. As you sort of foreshadowed, we'll see what the applicant's got to say about that shortly. Any further follow-up questions from the panel? Shake heads? No. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, James. That's the conclusion of the representations. So we'll now hear from the applicant, and I have been advised that Mr. Stuart Henry will be speaking as opposed to Mr. James Hilditch. Stuart, are you in the house?
I am now. We had some difficulty in joining the meeting, but
oh, that's a shame. Did you get to hear anything?
I came in halfway through Chris Vounassis's presentation, and I've listened to most of what's been said, but we've been dealing with technical issues about joining the meeting.
Yeah, it's definitely not an easy circumstance. So you've heard Phil Brunning and you've heard from James, I take it? I don't think you've missed out on too much.
No. Already a line there, but
yes. All right. Now we need to hear from you. I think under the circumstances of the very lengthy representations, I think I should give you a little bit more than 5 minutes, but we'll see how we go.
Thank you.
Over to you, Stuart.
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to start with the issue of existing use, just by way of emphasising the correct approach. The premises have long-standing existing use rights, and those rights extend back to the 1950s, since before the introduction of planning controls in the City of Adelaide. It's true that the premises have been extended and redeveloped in the usual way in the past by planning approvals. And those approvals have been approved by reference to plans which have indicated indicative activities in various rooms. Activities, however, change over time in all uses. It's important to appreciate the distinction between the use and the activities that go to define it. The use is defined by purpose, and those purposes will generally be carried forward, even though activities change from time to time. The sorts of things that people were doing in the 1950s are very different to the sorts of things that people are doing now. And it simply hasn't been, it has not been substantiated by any of the objectors that any of the activities that have been identified of which they complain to be unlawful. They all subserve exactly the same use. Now, there are difficulties in labelling this use, we accept that. There may be difficulties in finding a particular phrase or word that would define the use. That's not important. The question is what has been the purpose of the activities since the 1950s? And it has generally been to provide services to people who are in need of those services, and particularly people who are homeless. And there is no proposal to alter the nature or the purpose of that existing use. The manner of service delivery may change over time. The exact details of the activities conducted on site may change over time, but the purpose of the use remains the same, and it has always remained the same. This is a proposal for the upgrading of buildings and the grounds so that the social services that are being provided and will be provided can be provided in a more appropriate and contemporary setting. Now, having said that, I don't want the panel to think that we're hiding behind our existing use rights, because we say that it's a use which is entirely appropriate in the two zones and on that site. The land use is appropriate because in the Hutt Street zone, if I can call it that, community centre, consulting rooms, offices and restaurant are all appropriate. I mention restaurant because one of the core activities is the provision of meals to people who are in need. And in the St Andrews zone, consulting room, health centre, office, and in particular allied health services are appropriate. They're the sorts of activities that lie at the core of the services that are provided by the centre, and they are entirely supported, we submit, by the policies that you find in the development plan. And so the purpose of this DA is simply to improve the quality of the services already provided to clients in need. It's not to increase the number of clients. Everybody who wants these services and turns up is provided with them at the moment. Hutt Street Centre doesn't turn people away, nor does it beat its business model up. It simply deals with a need which exists out in the community. There is no increase in floor area, and there is no intensification. I listened to what some of the objectors said about the size of the centre's budget. You need to be very careful about that, careful about where the money is being spent. Is it being spent on site or is it being spent off site? I've listened to submissions about the different staffing arrangements and raw numbers of staff. You need to be very careful about that as well, because there's a difference between full-time equivalents and a series of casuals. But at the end of the day, this is not an intensification. And even if there was an intensification of activities, High Court authority says that in the absence of a change in purpose, an intensification of activity is not a change in the use of land for town planning purposes. And there is no change in purpose here. It's remained the same throughout. Can I deal with the anti-social behaviours that I think lie at the heart of the tensions out there? The idea that the centre attracts undesirables to the locality, or people who are prone to criminal or antisocial behaviour is entirely unsubstantiated. The centre provides much needed services, including meals, to clients who are in need. The clients are in need because of their circumstances. The centre doesn't create the need, the centre just seeks to address the needs. The clients are in the city, they will continue to be in need, they will continue to be in the city regardless of whether the centre provides services to them and regardless of whether the services are provided in Hutt Street or elsewhere. So even if the objector's wish was to come true, which it's not, that the centre would close down, that wouldn't make the clients or their needs go away. and refusing a refurbishment application certainly won't make the clients or their needs go away. And indeed, refusing the refurbishment application will not make the centre go away. It'll just have to continue on in its own premises, providing services that are less than optimal. So in short, the centre is not causing problems. They are existing problems in the community, and the centre is trying to solve them. One way of doing that is to get clients off the footpath and into a more secure facility where they can be supervised more effectively, to stop the sort of thing that you would have seen in these videos that have been circulated. People congregating near the entrance and getting into altercations. One of the purposes of this DA is to get the clients onto the premises where they can be supervised and regulated. I want to say something about the relationship between the centre and the police. Pardon me. That relationship is very good. SAPOL attend the centre on a regular basis, and also whenever they are called to an incident. The objective evidence is that crime in Hutt Street is only 2% of the total crime in the CBD, and by comparison, it's 1/10 of the crime in Rundle Mall, or indeed Hindley Street, and you'll see that in your agenda at page 266.
Stuart,
I would also invite
Stuart,
the panel. Yep.
Just letting you know where you're at. So
Yep.
5 minutes are up.
Yep.
So we'll let you go for a little bit longer.
Yep.
But just letting you know where we're at.
Rightio. I would also invite the panel's attention to what Assistant Commissioner Dixon says at the agenda at page 267 to 268 about the media storm. From what I can see here, the centre has been blamed for all manner of problems that have been occurring in Hutt Street, and without justification. There's two examples. The first was the example of a man who lived in a house nearby, hitting his own car with a hockey stick. You'll see that at agenda page 258 and 265, Hansard reference 1350 to 1353. He wasn't homeless. He wasn't a client of the centre, but the centre got blamed for this incident. And the second one was that there was a woman allegedly stabbed when, in fact, she'd been carrying a bottle, I think, and she'd fallen over, broken the bottle and cut herself with the bottle. And again, the centre got blamed for that as a stabbing. Can I say something about the videos? Have the videos been shown? I can't see them on the screen, but
Stuart, I'll
Yep.
just clarify. The videos were provided to us earlier today,
Yeah.
and they've been distributed only to the panel members.
Yeah.
They weren't asked to be played tonight.
Oh, they weren't.
No.
Okay. Well, which sort of puts us in a bit of a limbo, because if the panel members have seen them, then I probably ought to say something about them without seeking to legitimise them too much. Can I just say this? I've got 5 points to make. The traders and the residents have been complaining about the centre for 2 or 3 years now, and they've enlisted the help of the media. They plainly have closed circuit television surveillance of the entrance of the centre, and presumably that's on a 24/7 basis for 365 days a year. And they have come up with a handful of cherry-picked incidents to show to the panel. And the panel needs to approach that material with caution in a planning assessment for a DA for the refurbishment of a tired facility, where the refurbishment will provide a better and more secure and controlled facility where incidents on the footpath will hopefully become a thing of the past. And there is nothing in those videos which would be a proper basis for refusal. So in summary, can I say this? The staff report recommends approval. We commend the report to the panel. It provides a balanced assessment of planning merit, and we support the recommendation for approval subject to the conditions which the centre accepts. So Those are our submissions, if it pleases the panel.
Thank you, Stuart. Just stay there, please. Do any members of the panel wish to ask any questions of the applicant, Colleen, perhaps? No? Okay. Mads, did you wish to ask any questions? No. All right. I don't have any specific questions. Thank you, Mr. Henry, for your presentation. We'll now conclude the hearing and commence to consider the item. Panel members, might be appropriate for you to switch on your audio. Thank you, Mads. Would anybody like to make a comment or statement or ask a question or indeed move any particular recommendation? Mads, over to you.
Yes, this is not an easy issue, and as I said before, obviously there is a lot of emotion involved in this application here. I have to say that I have a feeling that the representatives' expectations of what this panel is able to decide, and especially in terms of things like land use, behavior, and the operation of the centre, is probably above what we actually can. In the papers we have received, it's quite clear that the main focus for what certainly I have been looking at is the physical changes to the centre as it is at the moment. I can even see some advantages with the internal changes to the centre in that more people would be able to be inside. I know that a number of the issues that has to do with behavior has been in the vicinity of the centre rather than in the centre itself. But I have to say that I have looked at this particular project far more in terms of the physical changes and the architectural aspect of it. And in that connection, I think that the proposal we've seen is an improvement of the streetscape of the public realm in Hutt Street compared to what it is now. I think if the centre remained as it is at the moment, and you can add the behavior that goes around the centre at the same time, the problems would perhaps even magnify. So within the framework that I believe this panel have to work, I have no particular problems with the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mads. Colleen, did you want to say anything before we ask for a motion?
I will. I think the issues raised by the representatives are not purely of a planning nature. Rather, it's a significant social issue which will not be addressed if we refuse this application. The police information is that the antisocial, criminal and violent behaviour is not confined to this area of the city alone, and that it's quite widespread. It's just that Hutt Street receives much more media attention than perhaps other areas or other providers, service providers. I'm not suggesting that the complaints are important, but I agree with the centre and the police that they probably have been unjustifiably blamed for behaviour. I'm not brushing this aside, and I'm not ignoring the representatives' entirely reasonable issues. And I just commend some of the representatives. Their statements are quite painful and agonising to read. So please understand that we've read and understood your issues. Suggesting that this proposal is unlawful I find quite astonishing. Reading of the desired character and objectives by the representatives has been very selective, and it ignores that the Hutt Street Centre clients are entitled to the benefit of the area. It would be very convenient if this all went away, but I think refusing the application is not going to achieve that. And I also don't believe that the development plan was written in such a way that it was the intention of council to evict the Hutt Street Centre. I can't see, therefore, that this is unlawful. I believe that this development won't grow or increase the services, it will just provide them in a better manner. Like Mads, I agree that the design proposals are careful and thoughtful and reasonable, and will provide the clients and the staff with improved amenity and particularly safety. I mean, reducing the number of concealment places to the front of the existing buildings will be of significant benefit. And just a final note, I think there appears to have been a significant change in the management and governance of the Hutt Street Centre. So I presume that that will lead towards an improvement of the behaviour. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Colleen, for those words. Look, I don't really have much to add to what you've said, Mads, and what you've said, Colleen. We've certainly had some very strong arguments put to us on both sides of the coin, and I don't think we can put ourselves in the role of adjudicating on whether there is a change of use or not. At face value, the application is for physical building works. It's not to change the use of the land. The building works are designed to improve the facility. If we were to refuse the application, those works wouldn't be undertaken and the status quo would remain. So I don't know what's going to be gained by doing that, but that's not the sole consideration for us. Our consideration is the development plan, and I think there is sufficient support in the development plan for us to accept that these works to the premises are going to be of benefit to both the facility and the community. And as other speakers have said, I don't want to take away from anybody that there have been undesirable activities in the area. This may not be the only activity that's led rise to those, and we can't be 100% sure that everything we've been told does actually relate to the facility. The applicant certainly has demonstrated a caring community spirit to involve SAPOL whenever and wherever possible. And approving or not approving this application is not going to substantially change that situation. Hopefully there will be some improvements as the applicant has promised. Anyway, I've said enough. Would anybody like to move the recommendation before you, which is, yes? Thank you, Colleen.
The recommendation.
Thank you. And Mads?
Happy to second.
You second that. Did you want to say anything further at this point?
I don't.
No, I think we've addressed the issues.
Okay, then we'll take a vote on the recommendation, which is as printed in the agenda papers tonight. Those in favour, show your hands for approval. Okay, so that's a majority vote. Thank you very much for that. Thank you, representors, and the applicant for presenting to us tonight on what is obviously a very difficult topic, but we appreciate your patience with our system and your contribution. That now closes item 4.1 on the agenda. And should anybody want to turn their computers and devices off and leave the meeting, we totally understand and would be not offended if you wanted to leave at this stage. In the meantime, we'll welcome back Aman and Mark.
Hello.
Are you with us?
I'm alive. Yes, alive and well.
You haven't fallen asleep?
No, it's still here.
Good. Excellent. We've dealt with item 4.1. We'll now move on to item 4.2 on the agenda, which is 11 to 13 Mills Terrace, North Adelaide, where we are being asked to look at the demolition of a dwelling and outbuilding and the construction of two-storey semi-detached dwellings. It was a Category 2 application. I believe there was one representation in favour of the application. No one has sought to be heard, so there's no hearing. I don't know if the applicant is present in the room, but I don't think we need to worry about that. We have a recommendation for approval. Would anybody like to move the recommendation or to make any other comment at this point? Mads.
Yes, I would like to recommend as, or to approve as recommended. I realize that there has been a little bit of a different opinion from the heritage architect, from the council's heritage architect and the consultant that has been giving a report also. All in all, I think it is a good proposal. I think the articulation of the facade toward the street avoids that the building overshadows or is too dominant with the buildings next door, and there's a considerable setback from the street also. So all in all, I will recommend it as a good result.
Thank you, Mads. Would anyone like to second that? Thank you, Colleen.
Second the proposal, and I agree with Mads. I think it's really quite carefully done and has been amended and changed to the satisfaction of the council staff. And so the addition of things like the pergola over the garaging and the landscaping would be is well done, and the choice of materials is lovely, and I think it'll be an asset.
Thank you, Colleen. Aman, did you want to make some comments?
No, just to echo the same commentary and feedback as the other members. I actually do like how the dwellings do set back. It's not too, I guess, confronting in relation to the streetscape. So, yeah, I do endorse it as well.
Thank you for that. And Mark, did you want to say anything, or are you happy?
Well, look, you're probably all burnt out, but I'm dying to say something, having sat here for a while. But I'm happy with the proposal. But if it was up to me, and it's just a matter of taste, I think I would have gone with a flat roof. But that's again my taste. I think having a pitched roof is sort of an obsessive way of looking at heritage having to look like other older buildings. But other than that, I think it's fine.
Thank you, Mark. Well, look, I think we'll just put this to the vote. Those in favour? Right, that's unanimous. So that is carried. So item 4.2 is approved as recommended in the agenda papers tonight. Now let me find out where we're up to. Item 4.3. is a retrospective application for a change of use to motor repair station at 441 Morford Street. It also was category 2 and there were no representations. Would somebody like to move the recommendation? Sorry, I looked away. Sorry, Colleen. Thank you.
That's right. And I've got two mice and I couldn't work out which one was which. No, I would like to propose the recommendation. I think that this is clearly quite a benign activity. It's been operating successfully without irritating the neighbours for some time. The applicant seems to be obedient with respect to use of the parking out the front. I'm not particularly troubled by the signage, but I think that as it's starting to peel off, it's probably time for them to deal with it. So I propose that it be granted.
Thank you, Colleen. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Mads. Did you want to say something?
Oh, look, I totally agree with Colleen. I think it's a fairly easy decision we have here, and I'm very happy to second it.
Thank you. Are there any other people who wish to speak? No. Mark?
Oh, well, again, let's say that the signage actually isn't development if you stuck it on the inside of the windows. So, yeah, I don't have any problem with that. I just assumed this had been approved 30 years ago because I drive past that every day and just a lawful use. But there you go. No, I think I'm happy to go with the staff recommendation on this one.
Thank you, Mark. Man, did you want to add anything?
No, not really. No, fairly straightforward. But thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. All right, panel, we'll put that to the vote. No further comment, presumably? No, we'll put that to the vote. Those in favour of the recommendation? Right, that's also unanimous. Thank you very much. Item 6.1, list of recent lodgements for planning consent. Has anybody seen anything there that they wish to raise? Yes, Mads? Turn yourself on.
Sorry, yes.
That's it?
Well, number 47 in Hindley Street, there is a building used for storage of vehicle. Does that mean a car park or what's it seemed to be a poor usage on Hindley Street?
Yes, thank you. Helen, would you be able to answer that question?
And through the chair. That is the old taxi rank or taxi business that used to run right down from the end of Hindley Street. So it's
yes, okay.
Petrol station, I think, associated, or it did have a petrol station associated with it as well. So yeah, it's not necessarily a car park, but definitely had the function of cars being located on the site. So there's not a lot of changes, I don't think, to the physical appearance of the building.
No, I understand that. I still think it's a poor usage of land on that particular street, but I do understand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Mads, I was just wondering, is that something you want called in, or are you just happy to sit with that answer?
No, I think at this point in time, I'll sit with this answer. Hopefully we'll get an interesting proposal coming up in the near future.
Thank you.
Mark, I've got a few to ask of Helen.
Go ahead.
Number 52, which is 257 to 259 Perry Street, construct 8-storey mixed-use building, including retail tenancy. Is that on the Wilson car park site next to the Tivoli?
Through the chair, that is the Wilson car park. It's the portion of the site that's to the south, to the rear
Oh, okay. All right. Would we see that in North? Okay.
Yes, we'll be coming to you for a decision.
All right. And is that true also of number 57, which is Stafford Street, Adelaide, which is 3 residential flat buildings?
Look, it is a category 2 development. So if there were and it's in the city living zone, it wouldn't need to come to you. But I'm probably anticipating I would get some anyway, although it's probably significant enough to come to you anyway, reps or no reps, given it's $3 million.
Hmm.
Would you like to call that in anyway?
I think so. Having had a look at the site, yes, I think it will have an impact on the neighbourhood.
No.
All right. Any further, Colleen?
Just number 62, which is 306 Gilbert Street, which is category 2, undertake alterations to existing dwelling and construct a 2-storey addition for use as a hostel. Are we likely to see that one?
They haven't even paid their fees yet, so it's not going very far. That is the site of a local heritage place that's fallen into disrepair, and it might have even come to the panel for a decision when they wanted to watch it. I think we might have put it to the panel, but someone's bought it now and wants to build a hostel to the rear. So the plans are very rudimentary. We've tried to provide a little bit of prelim advice with it, but not to really any great success. So look, it is a category 2, likely to have reps, and look, it's probably something that we would be keen to put to you anyway, I think.
Okay, that's good.
We can mark it to come to you if you want.
Well, just look, I'm happy if you keep an eye on it.
Okay.
On our behalf, and presumably there will be representations. It's otherwise a residential area, so
it's right on the cusp. It's right near the Elephant Castle Hotel, but I know that the owners or the people that run the pub have already called council to get some advice because they've got concerns about what's been developed there. So no doubt they'll be putting in a rep, I would say.
Sounds like we're going to see it.
Yeah, and look, as I said, they haven't even paid their fees yet. The fees were quite extensive, and I'm not sure the gentleman, the applicant, really is that experienced with this sort of thing. So look, it might not go anywhere, to be honest. But we'll see. We'll keep an eye on it for sure. Thank you.
That's all.
Thanks, Helen. Thank you, Colleen. Mads?
May I just bring one other one up? That's number 70. It's a project that has been quite controversial on the panel previously, and I see that it is going to be changed to an additional floor. Are we going to see that?
Yeah, look, it's a relatively minor variation, but likely to come to you anyway, given you made the original, or the panel made the original decision. So any variations generally do go back to the panel unless they're very, very minor, but this probably isn't minor enough for us to deal with under delegation.
Oh, that's fine. That's appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Aman, are you familiar with what we're doing, this process of just looking through the list of current new applications and seeing if there's anything there we think should specifically be called into the panel?
No, to be honest, I'm not familiar with this process, but in the past 5 minutes or so, I think I've wrapped my head around what it is that that the panel is trying to achieve. So I'm happy to sort of be guided by the panel this time around, and next time I'll make sure I'll contribute as well.
Fantastic, thank you. Mark, are you? Do you have any issues?
I just had a question actually for staff. Number 78. Now, what info do you have about that one? That's change of use to student accommodation, and they've got down a development cost of $150,000. So, what sort of application that was?
One room.
Yeah, well, it's apparently 9 rooms.
Helen, can you enlighten or you look into? Helen, you need to turn yourself on.
Sorry,
So to speak.
I forgot I had turned that off. I've just consulted with Phil because he did the assessment, or we did it, tag team that one because it was during COVID. It has already been determined. So your question is particularly around the 9 rooms, is that?
Yeah, what sort of development is it? It's 9 rooms in Angus Street. Just seems a strange one.
It's converting an existing building or a portion of an existing building for student accommodation. So I think they've got 9 rooms that they're converting in the upper level, and then the ground floor at the rear of the existing offices, they've got, I guess it's a disability, a DDA compliant room. So that's why that's what the 9 rooms and the 1 room is referring to.
Great, that's fine. Thank you.
That was actually Future Urban.
Oh, great. Well, it's good to know.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
It's amazing what we do and I don't know about. That's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, look, we did work on that one a little bit. It came in, it was a little bit under par, but we worked with the planning consultant and got it to a point where we could support it.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks, Helen. Any last chance? No. Okay. Thank you very much. All right. So perhaps if somebody could move that we receive that report. Thank you, Colleen. And a seconder is Aman. Thank you. Get your name in the minutes. We'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried unanimously. All right. Is there? I don't think there's any other business. Am I safe to say?
Sorry, Mark. Can I?
Yes, Mark.
Just on procedural matters, I'm not sure whether or not to talk about procedures. And we have a new member. I think obviously it's been very, very formal. It's something I'm not very used to. I'm not sure whether that's an item that is up for discussion, perhaps in the future.
Mark, you just broke up a little bit there. Can you just quickly recap that question again? Did everybody else get it? No. If you could just quickly recap, yeah. Hopefully the audio.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just wanted to raise the matter of CAP procedures. I think historically it's been run really formally. I don't know whether or not that's something that we wish to continue. Just from my experience and probably yours with SCAP, usually I think it's obviously tonight has been a bit different, but yeah, just wanted to know whether or not that's something that other members to traverse or whether they're happy with the way things are working.
Yeah, I'm not. I think your audio just dropped out at a very key word. The issue with the panel appointment, was it?
No, procedures.
Procedures.
Yeah, formality or lack thereof, or whether or not we wish to look at those procedures.
Okay. I actually would like to have a look at those. I'd be keen to do it. I don't know what. I don't want to encumber people with more time, but whether we just had a separate conversation outside of meeting about the procedures, or whether you wanted to do it by correspondence and if you've got some issues, pop them down in an email and then we'll see what they say and where we go from there. But I'd be more than happy to entertain any refinement or whatever that we might want to do of the procedures. Helen, what would you advise?
I'd like to pass on to sorry, can you hear me now?
That's better. That's better. Yep.
If I
Say
may,
again.
I'll come over to Shanti, if I may, because she would like to address this.
Terrific. Hi, Shanti.
Hello, Mark. Hello, members.
Oh, you know how to make your presence felt?
We're having technology issues here.
That's better.
Thank you, Phil. Members, it's entirely within the purview of the CAP to decide how it wishes to run its meetings, within reason, of course. We're happy to facilitate those discussions with members to enable that to happen. I don't believe there's anything within your terms of reference that would preclude or impact on that. Can I just say that in the time that I have seen councils, both DAP and CAP running, you're probably running it as informally as I've ever seen it, but that's not to say that there's no further capacity to make it more informal.
All right. Thanks, Shanti. Would members generally like to have a out of session discussion? It'd be much better if we could do it in person, but we could do it via this Zoom tool. Or would you prefer to just put in some written submissions? We'll see what they say, and then take it from there. What do you think? Perhaps if you could all just quickly comment, starting with you, Colleen.
I think, yes, it would be useful if we could just meet physically, but I think under the circumstances we could have a quick Zoom meeting about this and discuss it. I know that Mark and I have had discussions beforehand, so we have ideas.
Good, thank you. Mads?
Yes, well, I'm quite comfortable with the way the meetings are going at the moment, but of course I've spent a number of years within this format here. I would be interested to hear what the new ideas is. I would actually prefer to have it as an email first before we meet in a Zoom meeting. So there's a chance to consider what changes might happen.
Okay. Aman, do you have any particular?
I guess I wouldn't mind seeing maybe some suggestions in an email before we get together, but in relation to the formality of the meetings, I'm only I guess used to council meetings, so they're fairly formal, so I'm happy to be guided by the other members. Yeah, that's my only feedback.
All right, thank you for that, Mark. Would you be happy with the idea of we give ourselves a certain amount of time to have a bit of a think, jot down some notes, circulate them through Helen or whoever to each other, and then you know, a week or so after that we can call one of these Zoom meetings, or hopefully we'll be back to normal by then, and see where we go from there.
Yeah, that's great. An email on that basis, and then that can sort of start the conversation.
Good. All right. Well, we'll do that. Helen and I will work something out and get that ball rolling. I think it's worth it. Just even if it doesn't result in any changes, it's still worth taking check. Okay. Was there any other business? I don't think we need to minute that discussion, do we? I think that's just something we can do. Helen's not committing herself. No, okay. All right. Okay. Well, look,
Sorry, I think it needs to be Judy that would respond to that, whether that
okay.
needs to be. So I was leaving it for her to respond.
Sorry, panel members. Sorry, Helen. I will include a note in the minutes that indicates a discussion will be held in relation to the meeting procedures for the panel.
All right, but we don't have to resolve anything particularly?
No, you do not. You've given an undertaking to do so.
Yeah, excellent. Terrific. That'll keep us honest. Thank you very much, Judy. All right, well, look, if there's no other business, anyone? We'll close the meeting. The next meeting is scheduled for the 25th of May, so hopefully we'll see you all then. Thank you very much. Now, just quickly, thank you all for your forbearance tonight. Not easy, especially the first time, and especially for Aman. It's his first meeting, and we haven't even got to meet you in person. But also thank you to Helen and Judy and the team. There's a whole lot of other people that have been working very hard to actually make this happen, and I know it's not easy. So I think it's gone pretty smoothly under the circumstances. So I'm very appreciative of that. Thank you very much. Job well done. All right, I'll close the meeting, say good night to everybody, and see you in a month's time.